Thank you, Alan, for inviting me, and thank you all for being here. I think it is no coincidence that I am here to speak about Benazir Bhutto's life as I saw it from afar, especially on this day, because this day had a special significance for her. Benazir was very committed to the rights of the people who lived in Srinagar. And today is, as we say, the Kashmir Day, where people are protesting against the atrocities committed by the state against the people living in Kashmir, particularly in Srinagar. And why I think she felt so strongly about it, because she herself had been a victim and remained one of bigoted politics and repression. I cannot profess to know Benazir as a close friend. I think there are people in this room who knew her much better, like Victoria. But I cannot say that I was only an acquaintance of Benazir, because somehow there was a connection between her and me. It was a strange connection. When Benazir's father, late Zulfikar Bhutto, became Prime Minister of Pakistan, the first person he arrested was my father. And when the death sentence was given and awarded to Zulfikar Bhutto, my father was so agitated, he went from pillar to post to try and save him. And I thought, what is this kind of a friendship? And how can he save somebody who put him in prison? But that is what the political culture of Pakistan is. You stand for your principles. You do not support or offend people simply because they have offended you at a certain point. I knew Benazir as a child. We both did our O-levels together. She from Karachi and I from Lahore. And some of you who may have done your O-levels in Pakistan, you would realize that often the results come one day before in Lahore or one day before in Karachi. So there are always rumors, and Pakistan is known for its rumors, as you all know, that the Cambridge results are out. And so she would call me up and say, are they out? And I would say, no. What about you? And then I would call her up. And finally, we did manage to get the results on the same day, and we were calling up each other to tell each other that the results were out. I knew her mother stayed at our house before her father became Prime Minister, and he was under arrest. So we have a strange relationship. When Benazir came back to Pakistan, I felt ashamed at that time because I had a certain resentment towards her. A resentment that I should have never had. A resentment that she and her father had arrested my father, having completely overlooked the fact that the man he arrested was the very person who went out to save him. But Benazir sent a message, and she came to our house to condole, because by that time my father had died. Why I am telling you this is that she had a way of reconciling. She had a way of telling you without saying, I know what happened was wrong. She came, and that was the message. And from there on, we picked up our friendship with each other. She was never my leader as a political leader because I was never in her party. And I never studied with her. I never went to school or college with her. But I felt that she had changed the political culture of Pakistan. And through the years that I knew her, she transformed herself, and she also transformed the political culture of Pakistan. It became a more tolerant culture. People were not abusing each other. People were not arresting their opponents. People were not hiding and condoning extrajudicial killings. People were not giving justification for torture. And that is what Benazir gave us. But let me remind some of you who have been in Pakistan, when she came into power, everybody felt that she was too young, that she was too immature. She wouldn't last long. Indeed, she didn't last long. But then neither have anybody else lasted longer. Because Pakistan is a country where if you represent the people, if you really do come into power with the support of the people, you're always a threat to the establishment. And the minute she stepped into power, she became a threat to the establishment. And when you're a threat to the establishment, then you're a threat to Pakistan. And that was the buzz the minute she came. But what she did was amazing. She was in power for 1 week. She banned public hanging. She banned flogging. She released all women under trials who were accused of the infamous Zina Act under the Hudud Ordinance. And she released all children. And that was the first message of a new political culture, of a new political turnaround in Pakistan. And the message was that this is not going to be a repressive state. And more than that, when she came in, that was the first time in my life that I had ever been on television. Because television opened up. There was only Pakistan TV, and many of us, or many people I'm sure in this room whose parents are my age, were banned from coming into PTV. And I still remember the first program on PTV that I went to. This person called me up, who was MD PTV, and said, Prime Minister has said that you must come on PTV on this program. And I spent hours rehearsing and doing my makeup. And then I got a message from Radio Pakistan saying the Prime Minister wants all women who are activists to come on radio and talk about women's rights. So almost every day I was on radio, and we got so many letters of women in as far as Gilgit who are saying, we're hearing your program, we didn't know that we had this right. And this was a silent revolution that was going on. And we never realized what was happening. As far as my own sense is concerned, I have never said this to her. I wish I had one day while she was alive. Victoria would know that I was always very critical of her, in front of her, and also about her publicly. But I think she was the finest politician that Pakistan has ever had. When she was there, I felt a sense of security. And I will give you the reason why I felt a sense of security. Not because I was secure. It was because the people whom we are struggling for felt secure. There was a case that I did, and this was a case of a young boy, 14-year-old, with 2 other men who were Christians, and it was a case of blasphemy. And it got picked up widely in international press and media, and they got convicted by the trial court. And I was wondering why she is not doing something about it. How come that she's silent about it? And the day they got convicted, the next day I was quite traumatized. I was in court. And the Advocate General came to me and said, come to my office, please, because the Prime Minister wants to speak to you. And she was on the other end. And this was a time when I was quite upset with her. And she said, what has happened? I said, shouldn't you know what has happened? Am I the Prime Minister or are you the Prime Minister? She said, you would be a very poor Prime Minister. And that was, it just broke the ice. And she asked me, are you going to appeal? And just to tease her, I said, no, I'm not going to appeal. There's no point in appealing. Because let the minorities die in Pakistan. When people cannot do anything about it, I'm not going to appeal. Why don't you appeal? And so there was deadly silence at the other end. She said, let me talk to the Advocate General. I think we'll talk again because you're in no mood to talk. I had already filed appeal and the Advocate General didn't know about it. And then this case went into appeal and the people got acquitted. Just before they got acquitted, I get a message from someone saying, the Prime Minister is saying, it is for the state, as you put it, it is for the state to protect them. You have done enough, now let the state step in. And so I left after my argument because I had a heart problem. I came to London and I saw on television that the young man and the two people, by that time one had already been killed, the second person, were taken by the government, put on a flight and sent away to Germany. I was amazed, how did that happen? And I said, well, this person said to me, you said it's the business of the state, so let the state do it. I also remember many, many memories of Benazir. And sometimes she could even be quite funny, I mean, in a real comical sense. Because she invited me for dinner in Dubai. And so I got a phone call saying, no, first come for lunch. So I went for lunch. And it was a time when Mr. Ayer Rahman, who's a journalist, and myself were traveling to Dubai together. So I thought the dinner was cancelled and this was lunch. She said, the lunch is for Mr. Ayer Rahman. Dinner is for you. So I thought, now maybe she wants to talk to me separately. But as we were leaving, she said, Mr. Rahman, you are coming for dinner. I said, yes. This lunch was for you. Now that dinner is for her. So we said, fine. And I said to Mr. Ayer Rahman, because you got very poor food at Benazir's house, believe me. I said, now dinner will be better. Because she's taking us out. Guess where she took us? McDonald's. So I said to Mr. Ayer Rahman, we are not in good luck with eating today at all. She was not a conservative woman, but she was a conventional woman. She believed that a certain amount of conventions have to be kept. Marriage is important, keeping a marriage is important, aunts are important, uncles are important, and even relationships are important. But she also realized that she's not a revolutionary. Because Alan used the word, she negotiated. And she could negotiate. She chipped away. And that is why I often think of her as a very strategic politician. She was not idealistic in her actions, but she had an ideology that was idealistic. And to achieve that, she did negotiate. It went against her grain even sometimes, because when I'd say to her, this is what is happening, I'm told, she never owned up to it, because I knew that she didn't like it herself. And she had to survive, and she was a great survivor. I remember that for many years, for 2 terms, I was chairperson of the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan. And this was a time when Benazir was Prime Minister. So as chair of the Human Rights Commission, I had to point out the human rights violations. And she was always arguing with me and said, Asma, I am not running an NGO, I am running a country. And so I would say, yes, you may be running a country, but there are certain limits. She says, I have my red lines. And I still remember her saying. And I always remember that word, because living in a society that is as complex as ours, red lines are important. I remember that there was a conference of UNESCO in which she was coming as Prime Minister, and it was co-hosted by the Human Rights Commission and UNESCO. So we get a message from UNESCO saying that Prime Minister doesn't want Atiya Ayatollah, who was in the other opposing party, to sit on the dais. And I said, that's really very petty and small. So I said, no, but she has to sit. Unless the Prime Minister does not call us up, she would sit. And then even if she does, we will tell her that this is not possible. So while we were sitting, I sort of said to her, I got a message that Atiya should not be here. Who gave it to you? She said. I said, so and so. That's her petty little thing. You think I'd ever say something like that? And it was a speech that was written for me by all the people in the Human Rights Commission who were on the board. And it was a very tough speech, because many of the people, many of the council members understood that I had a soft spot for Benazir, and they didn't want me not to be hard on her. And it was a very hard-hitting speech. She heard it, and while she was going, she said to the person who was there from Pakistan television, make sure that the entire speech of Asma is also on television. Otherwise, she will say that she has only got her speech, the answer, and not mine. And I checked that the entire speech was indeed there. In some ways, she was very secure within herself. And in other ways, she was not. She was secure if you gave her criticism, and she believed that that criticism came from the heart. That that criticism was based on something that was objective. But where she did get upset was where criticism came only because she happened to be Benazir Bhutto. And because there was a bias against Benazir Bhutto. There was always a hatred, a Bhutto hate that continues to exist in Pakistan. There was always an unacceptability of the fact that she was a woman. And it continues to be there in Pakistan. But she made her place. She made her place as a young woman in that society amongst people whom I had heard saying that she would be a complete failure. And then they were eating out of her hands. I will give you 3 examples of how I thought she could turn on her charm like this. There was one meeting of the Human Rights Commission in Peshawar, and one of our office bearers had asked us for dinner, Mr. Iftikhar Gilani. And there were some members of the board who said, no, we cannot go to a dinner where Benazir Bhutto will be there because we don't want the Human Rights Commission to be associated with Pakistan People's Party. And there were others who wanted to go. Finally, it was decided that we will go, but we will keep our distance with Benazir Bhutto. And believe me, the few people who said we will keep our distance with Benazir Bhutto were eating out of our hands after the dinner was over. And I recollect very well that we were all sitting and she was outside in the veranda. And she said to Mr. So-and-so, Mr. So-and-so, how nice you've come. And he sort of shook like that. Then she went up to him and said, you know, I've always thought of you a very good lawyer. And he got up. And then I saw that they both started walking towards one corner and they were laughing and chatting. And then the Mr. number 2, who had said we shouldn't go, also got up and then somehow steered his way towards that corner. And then Mr. number 3, who was the most critical and said that we must keep a distance, called me and said, can you take me and introduce me to Benazir Bhutto? So by the end of the dinner, 2 of them joined Pakistan People's Party. Now this is a fact, and I always tease them about it. Then when she was in exile, you know, she had got isolated, not because she had got isolated from the people, because you saw when she came back, which reminds me that we have a clip also that we must play, that I brought. When she came back, she was the heartthrob of the people. Because regardless of the fact that she came from an aristocratic family, she was very happy with ordinary people. That is where I found her in her best element. Victoria, would you agree there? And I remember now, there are times that I met her, and she's taken me with her for tea or something in homes which has plastic covers and red curtains, and she's felt completely at home there. And I wondered, Benazir, what are you doing here? And she would turn around and say, these are the people who were with me in my time of need. And she never ever forgot that. But I remember that she was in Dubai, and we decided, I'd met her and said, why don't you make up with Asma Jahangir, who was a political party leader? And she said, he won't talk to me because I had said this thing, or my father had said this thing. I said, well, I'm sure you can. So we somehow managed to convince him that he should go to Dubai to meet her. And so I called her up and said, we're putting him on that flight. Make sure he's eating out of your hand. She said, yes, yes, leave it to me. And sure enough, Mr. Afzal Wali came back saying that she was the most fantastic leader that he has ever met. And I wrote this year in newspaper, this incident, and Afzal Wali sent me a message saying, absolutely right, she's still eating out of my hands. I also recall she came back and she was staying in Lahore, and she wanted somehow to make up with Nawaz Sharif, whom she'd fallen out with, because of the so-called negotiations that she had done with the government. And so she gave me his number. I called him up in Saudi Arabia. I said, you convinced him, if both of you work together, things can be very different, so on and so forth. So he said, okay, fine, tell her to call me up. Now this is a strange one, because why I'm telling you this is how things happen in Pakistan. So I went to her house where she was staying in the cantonment and said, he's waiting on the phone. She said, yes, I'll call him up in 10 minutes because she was in a meeting. Half an hour later, I called up Mr. Nawaz Sharif. He said, no, I got no phone call. I called her up. She says, I've been trying to call him up. He doesn't pick up the phone. And this went on for a good 2 hours with me back and forth. Finally, I took my daughter's mobile, because it couldn't have been mine or hers, to her and said, I'll dial it and he'll pick it up. And he did pick it up. So the people who were dialing for her, who were closest to her, were not really dialing Mr. Nawaz Sharif. And this is how things happen in Pakistan. But there are so many memories. But let me tell you that she was extremely compassionate. But at the same time, there were compelling circumstances that made her look the other way. And I can never forget those. For example, there was a lot of extrajudicial killings in Karachi. And a complaint had come to her while she was Prime Minister. There was an industrialist called Farooq Sumar who said that people are taking extortion money. The others were saying that we are being killed. So it was decided by all parties that a team of Human Rights Commission should go and do fact-finding. And we did go, and we came back and we gave her the report. She read it and she was very upset. And she said to me, we sent you for extortion, and you have come back and said there are extrajudicial killings. So I said, yes, there is. You can't tell us that we just look at extortions and give you a report, and not give you a report of what is staring us in the face. But she was so upset about that report. I remember she pointed a finger at us. She was mad about it. But she understood. She understood. And she herself leaked that report. I have another example. After her brother was assassinated, I don't know whether Victoria remembers this or not, she came to London for a lecture. And that was the time when Pakistan's government had recognized the Taliban government. And I knew that she was there, and I was somehow dying to go to that lecture. But the Pakistan High Commission had refused me an entry ticket or a pass to go there. But I was determined to get there. So what I did was that I got hold of someone else's pass. And I arrived there. And so when question answer took place, I got up and asked her. I said, Prime Minister, you have recognized the government of Taliban. Don't you think that being a women's rights advocate, that is a wrong thing to do? And she somehow fight that question. It must be still there on BBC. And she left. And then Shahnaz Wazir Ali came running saying, she wants to meet you. And we met, we hugged each other, and then she was a very naughty question. So that for me was Benazir Bhutto, but compassion. I tell you that I have seen tears in her eyes when I have gone to her and said, I never called her Prime Minister, I don't think Victoria did. I was called a Benazir. I said, you know, there is a man, there's a journalist that your government has arrested. His name is, it wasn't Afsan Yar, it was something else, Zafar Yar, of Viewpoint. And her foreign minister was there, and her education minister was there. He said, yes, the interior minister did. And interior minister was Mr. Babar or someone. And I said, you know, that man, he's got his head the way around. This man, if there is a punishment for stupidity, please do give it to him. That's what he is. But he is not a spy. And then she looked at Shanaz Wazir, and he was there, and she said, yes, Prime Minister is not a spy. He's worked in Viewpoint, he's been an activist, he's been a strong People's Party supporter for so long. And then I told her that they put him up, they beat him. I have reports that they tortured him. And she looked at me, oh God, I am so sorry that this has happened. And she called up Interior Minister right away and said, nobody is to touch him and nobody is to oppose his bail. Let him get out. Then there is another story that I have. I mean, it's not a story, it's recollections of a very remarkable woman. A woman who will never be forgotten by those who encountered her. She truly lives in the hearts and minds of the people of Pakistan. And I saw that because my daughter is a journalist. And when Benazir Bhutto went after the floods, I saw the clipping she got back that old women putting their hands on his face. Our Bibi's son is here, they said. That is the kind of love and affection they have for her. We were working with bonded labor, and there is a lot of bonded labor in Sindh as Haris. They're mostly Hindus, and they're taken by big landlords. Their families are kept there. They're not allowed to go out, and so we were having difficulty getting this bonded labor free, because once we get them free, the police would arrest them again. And then we had information that some very powerful person, I will not name him, had also bonded labor on their lands. So I was called up by the Hyderabad Human Rights Commission and said, what are we to do? Now this man, if we try and challenge him, there can also be bloodshed here. And I was really upset. So I sent her a fax. At that time it was a fax. Her principal secretary called me up from Japan. He said, you know, the Prime Minister looked at her briefing and she saw your fax on the plane and she was extremely upset. What do you want done? So I said, well, can you send a message to all the deputy commissioners of Sindh that they should not stand in our way, they should support us in releasing bonded labor. And believe me, faxes went to all deputy commissioners of Sindh. And do you know how many bonded labor was released during those 2 years? There were over 35,000 people. And Benazir never took credit for it. I often said to her, you forget what you do. You never take credit for something that you have done right, but you always get blamed for something you have not done. I now remember that a few days ago I was going through some case law. Do you know the first case that was filed in Pakistan against a political leader for not being virtuous and mean and honest was against Benazir Bhutto. It's a reported judgment. And it is so disgusting because it says that when she was in Oxford, she was wearing a dress. And the annexures are not in the reported judgment, but there is a dash there. And that there are reports, there are photographs of her in this newspaper while she was at Oxford and Harvard. And I thought, how humiliating, how awful. Believe me, all these years that I have known her, I have heard the wildest of allegations against that woman. The way she was humiliated, the way her nose was rubbed in the dust, and yet she stood so dignified. How she did it, I cannot tell you. I do not know. But I must recall my last meeting with her. We were both under house arrest during the sheriff's period. We both got released on the same day. And she called me up and said, "Where are you?" And I said, "I'm going to the courts because I have to thank the lawyers who supported me." And she said, "Okay, but come quickly because I have to talk to you about something." I had lunch meeting with Mr. Afrasab Khattak, who was my successor as Human Rights Commission chairperson. And I said, "He's here from Peshawar." She said, "Bring him along." So we both went there, we sat there for a long time, and there was, as usual, about 200 people waiting outside and 20 people with her and 30 in the next room. So really, we couldn't really talk, and I didn't know why she had invited me. So around 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock, I said, "Okay, goodbye." She said, "But we didn't talk." Now, in our days, in our youth, it never used to be ISI. It was CID. So I said, "Your uncle's CIDs are here. How can you talk?" She said, "Yes, you're right. It's full." So she said, "I'm going to have early dinner and I'm going to come and see you." So I was a little bit shaken because knowing her security, I didn't want to tell anyone that she was coming. So I called up my daughter. I said, "Lock up the gates. Just don't let anyone into the house or anyone inside the house go out." Because I did not want to take the responsibility of Benazir coming there and some incident taking place. But I did call up a few journalists and I did call up a few human rights and, a few lawyers. There were about 50 of us because I felt that she was a politician. She doesn't want to just come and talk to me for 5 minutes and go away. She's a politician. She wants to make public opinion. She was very good at it. And so she did sit around the dining table, and people had come from Women's Action Forum saying, "Oh, what has Benazir done? Horrible, this, that, and the other." As usual, Benazir fielded every question, and she was very clear about what she had done. She was very clear about the fact that we have to fight in partnership with each other against the deep state of Pakistan. She was very clear about the fact that if we are to get rid of religious intolerance, that we will have to get rid of those undemocratic forces that operate with impunity in Pakistan. And after the meeting, we went to another room in which she did say to me that there is a threat against her. And there were other people also there. But she also said to me that, I've been told that Masoodullah is the person. But then I have someone who told me that they asked him, a senator of hers from Fatah, that he's not interested in killing me. I mean, that's how candidly she was discussing her assassination. And then she left for Dubai after we met. By this time, a lot of buzz had gone on. And some of my friends like Afrasab Khattak and others said to me, "Warn her, there's a trap for her." And I don't know who has that BlackBerry, but on her BlackBerry, I did text her, "Don't come back. There is a trap for you." She knew it. She was a brave woman. I have never seen a braver woman. And she genuinely cared about the fate of that country. Because I've heard her talk passionately about how it can be solved. Because nobody, and especially her, wanted power beyond her life unless she did not care for the people, and that is why the people of Pakistan loved her. Every single day, I think of her. And I think had Benazir been here, it would have been very different. Today's Pakistan would have been extremely different to what it is today. I am not saying that she was Mother Teresa. She never pretended to be Mother Teresa. I am not saying that she was Che Guevara, because she never was Che Guevara. But what she was, an extremely decent human being. A human being who was sharp, who was decisive, who knew what she was doing. She had her weaknesses, but she was never proud of her weaknesses. That's why Benazir Bhutto was a leader that People's Party lost. They didn't only lose a leader. They lost their secretary, they lost their strategist, they lost their person in action, because she was the person who did everything from writing letters to emails to press releases to putting people together to building consensus to understanding who should be kept away, who should be brought forward. They lost what I would say is their main mixer and their main driver of that party. And I do hope that one day her son, who has time on his side and who has a right inkling, will also be free of the shackles of the kind of pressures that are on him, so that we can once again have perhaps not a leader like Benazir, because Benazir was also a woman, but somebody whom we can look up to and say, yes, there was a leader in Pakistan. And now when you look around, I think you will understand that politicians are always not Mother Teresa's. Politicians all over the world, the value and the quality has dropped. But Benazir was far above them, far, far more superior. And what she went through, perhaps very few women in politics went through. So thank you very much that you asked me to remember her. I always will remember her as a normal human being with failings, but overwhelmingly with a character which is unmatched by most politicians of the world. May I now show you a clip, because that is how I would always want to remember her. That is the real lioness that I remembered her, roaring, telling people what to do. And that is always what I would like to remember of her. Thank you.
Let's see if we have the clip. If we don't have the clip, we should move straight to questions. We may or may not have it.
Casey has it. Okay.
Casey's got it. Well, if Casey's got it, she will make it happen.
Right.
But meanwhile, is it possible to have the lights up, the house lights up, just so you can see? Not on us.
Not on you.
The lights on the audience lights up.
Sorry, I can't control them up here.
But meanwhile, somebody please lead up with a question. Yes.
Yes. Okay. I have a question regarding the end of the speech, especially talking about Benazir Bhutto. And you showed that you have a hope that he may be, and talk about threats as well. So I would like to have your opinion more on Benazir Bhutto, that what brings hope from him and what type of threats you think he has.
Well, for one, he has a very liberal bent of mind. Secondly, even if he has half what Benazir has, which I am sure he does, he is a breath of fresh air because he has not learned the art of flying in Pakistan. And so far, I think that is a way forward. Obviously, he is not that old. There will be maturity that will come later. But if you see some of his interviews at Davos, they were really quite good. And the way he shows his work. So the promise is there. I cannot predict the future, but the promise is there. I do not think any other leader in Pakistan would talk about gender issues the way he does, about security issues the way he does. And he's very clear on these issues.
Yes.
You made various comments. You said Pakistan would be a very different place today if Benazir had survived. got. Can you explain exactly what you meant by that and what would be your vision of Pakistan today under Benazir's legacy?
You know, the People's Party is perhaps the only party in Pakistan apart from ANP, because ANP is more or less a party of a particular province. This is a national party, which has a liberal underpinning. And if you look not just the leaders, but even their whole cadres and their workers, you see that women are there full force, that they are politically very shrewd and aware. It's not that they have suddenly come into politics, they've had a long period of struggle, the worker of the People's Party. They identify themselves with freedom of religion, they identify themselves with freedom of speech, and so did their leader. And she also had amazing popularity. But today what has happened in Pakistan is that you choose between the right and the worst right. The left has completely been decimated. And by left, I don't mean the left the way you mean it here. I mean somebody who respects human rights to a certain extent. But there are people who now talk about human rights, but they have no respect for human rights. For example, if you talk to many of the political parties, they're talking about public hanging now. And they don't know what they're saying now. Benazir's party would never talk about public hanging, although it was a member of our own party who started it now. But had Benazir been there, he wouldn't have dared say it. That's the difference. Plus, she did not come down to the level of discourse that has taken place in the last few years that we have seen. You had two people from Oxford who are our leaders, she and another man. And if you see his discourse and her discourse, there's a world of a difference.
Can you say a bit about she came to Pakistan having spent quite a lot of time in the West, including at Harvard and Oxford. What difference do you think that made to her, those experiences, those university times?
You know, I'm not sure, because the number of people who you see there in Pakistan who actually adhere to human rights values have not come to Oxford or Cambridge. I mean, we as I told you, we have another leader who's come from Oxford. He doesn't know the spellings of human rights. We had a president who came from Oxford, and he stabbed Benazir in the back. We have a number of people from Oxford and Cambridge and Harvard.
They may have gone to the wrong college.
Probably. Or judges, they have been, in fact, more of a disappointment. But the fact that she came here, I think intellectually she was much brighter. She had read, she knew history, she knew what politics is all about, she knew world politics. She was not a frog in the well. But the values need not necessarily have come from here. Because, I mean, you have people like poets like Jalib and Faz who never studied abroad, and they had huge, amazing vision, amazing commitment to human rights. I can count hundreds of people there who have had amazing commitment to human rights. But it made her more accomplished, I'm certain, and she knew international politics extremely well.
She was well taught. Yes.
When she was
Well, actually, there was something that I'll come to you in a second. Yes.
Margaret, thank you so much for speaking with such clarity. It's somewhat evident that you have a clear admiration for dignity. My question is, evidently BBG is a very independent woman. So can you share some information about her relationship with Zardari and how that impacted her politics, and following her death, how Zardari's prime ministership impacted her?
Well, let me tell you something, that we are all independent women. But I can assure you that I am not independent where my husband is concerned. In the sense that I adore him, I love him, and he's from Cambridge, incidentally. But it is a society, regardless of where you are, and regardless of how liberal you claim yourself to be, a wife will be wife and is expected to kowtow to your family, to yourself. Now, as I told you that I cannot claim that I am a close friend of Benazir, so I will not claim to know her relationship with her husband any more than you and I would, any more than anyone else. But I do not believe half the things that are said either. Because I know that only yesterday I saw a clipping of my husband in one of the social medias, but it's not my husband. So, and also, once I was arrested, there were orders to arrest me, and the police went to Mr. Jahangir Badr's house to arrest me, and arrested his wife, thinking that I am Mr. Jahangir Badr's wife. For many years they thought that. So this is, Pakistan thing. It is but obvious that they had a relationship that was not very smooth. But it is also obvious that he was in jail for many years. And he was in jail for reasons that she was a political leader. For me, it is also obvious that he did not compromise her in the sense of coming out, saying things that the establishment may have perhaps liked him to say. But if you look at Mrs. Zardari as president and Benazir, I think you can tell the difference. Benazir is Benazir. He can't come there.
I was interested in how her ideas developed, but she was at Oxford for some time. She was quite revolutionary. She wrote a book which was great, idealistic, socialist. And obviously, as long as she got more involved in politics, she had to become much more realist. She had to balance, describe Pakistan as hugely complex and messy. So I wonder if you could just share with us how her idea, how her political development.
Yeah, I did know her when she was in Oxford. I mean, you're obviously in a better position and Victoria to know her. But what I can tell you is that every rich kid who comes from Pakistan becomes a socialist and a revolutionary in Oxford. And they revolutionize all night and sleep all day. But I can imagine that she would be. I can imagine that and that idealism was still there. You could see it. It's not that she was a woman who was very hard and sort of not as deep down only practical. No, she had her idealism. She was very compassionate. I want to just tell you that once there was an attack on me and people came to kill me and my kids, and then I was told by the person in Lahore, the police chief, that there had also been orders from militant groups that they should kill your children as well and throw the dead bodies on the main road so that people don't take these cases of blasphemy more. So I got really quite worried, and after 2-3 weeks of these people not getting arrested, my friends persuaded me to go and see Benazir. I went there and she already had the governor of the province and the chief minister sitting there. And there was dry fruit in front. And she was trying to tell them that, look, and I said to her, I wouldn't have come to you, but it's also a question of my children now. And believe me, she had tears in her eyes. Mr. Ayraman was there, witness to this. Asma, what about your life? Do you think your life is not precious? And then she said to her governor, stop eating those nuts, because you're making a lot of noise while eating those nuts, And he kept this nut away and said, now listen to me, both of you, give her your mobile numbers so that she can talk to you. And I want the strictest security around the house. I want each of her kids covered. And every single day, she would call up the chief secretary of Punjab, say, are you looking after my friend or not? So it's not that she was not idealistic, she was a very committed person. As I said, I don't call her my friend, but she was very concerned about that young boy, as I told you. But, you know, when you are a politician, it's a different thing. And that is why when she used to say to me, I don't run an NGO, I'm not a human rights activist. I am a prime minister of a country with a constitution, this she didn't say, but I'm saying now, with a constitution that is sprinkled with religion. A country which has an called ideology of Pakistan. I don't know what it means. Whether it is Qaeda Muhammad Ali's ideology or General Sher Ali's ideology, but certainly General Sher Ali's ideology seems to have won in Pakistan. There are people who look down on women. I mean, obviously she didn't want to cover her head, but she did. I think she did the wrong thing, in my view. She need not have. She could have got away with it, without it. But she did. She realized that she has to somehow convert herself in some ways to be able to get that kind of acceptability in a very conservative and in places a very bigoted society as it was. And mind you, she did transform the political culture. And I think that we don't realize how much she did. We don't give her the kind of credit that she deserves.
One up there. Let's do the question at the back first.
Thank you so much for giving this talk. It's an absolute pleasure. We came over 2 months ago, and that was a very interesting talk as well. My question is more about the future. So we had such an amazing leader, and I've read her book, and she's an inspiration to all of us. So what are the ingredients that we require to produce another Benazir? And one of the ladies from this room or back home, how can we produce another Benazir which can lead our political system?
But I think every person is different. You have a Benazir and you have my friend Malala here. But certainly I would say produce more women leaders. But in any event, when you're talking about the future of this country, I think what she said that day at my house still stands true. If you want the country to open up, you will have a better future. This is common sense now. I mean, all of you are studying here. You don't need common sense to study Oxford. If you're closing your doors to everyone, and this is a country, and this is not just a country. I worked, for example, a lot in the UN. For 6 years, I was UN's Special Rapporteur on Extrajudicial Killings, which actually sees the intestines of every country. Then 6 years, freedom of religion, and now I am UN Special Rapporteur on Iraq. So you can see what I'm talking about. But where a country gets obsessed with its own security and begins to suspect its own leaders, I think something is very wrong. Therefore, in Pakistan, to get a genuine leader out will be very difficult. Benazir was a security risk, according to our erstwhile generals in Pakistan. Nawaz Sharif is a security risk. Faiz Ahmad Faiz was a security risk. Mujibur Rahman was a security risk. There has never been a leader, Wali Khan always was a security risk. There has never been a leader which the people have elected that is not a security risk for Pakistan. So does Pakistan exist for the people of Pakistan, or does it only exist in the cantonments of Pakistan? I think that is what we have to decide. And unless you do not marginalize a very powerful elitist military junta
we will have no working relationship with our neighbors, whether it is Afghanistan, or whether it is Iran, or whether it is Pakistan. And we will not know who our friends are and who our enemies are. And I think now to continuously harp about enemies and friends is something of the past. We have to talk about our own interests. They are not looking at your interest. All they want is to make sure that there is enough money to feed them. The rest of the people in the country can fend for themselves.
Yes, thank you. Lovely. You've partly answered the question. Can you speculate how different things would have been if she hadn't been married?
Yes, I will say. I think, first of all, she was a consensus builder also.
Sorry?
Consensus builder. She had the heart of putting people together. She would have worked with Nawaz Sharif. And she was very clear on that, to marginalize those sections of our society that benefit from a dictatorship regime. You see, if I can become a minister by simply going to a general's house and praising them, why would I want to go to these dirty masses to get my votes? So there is a certain section of class that actually benefits from military governments in our country. Do you know that Pakistan is a country where we actually imported a prime minister? I'm not exaggerating. We imported a prime minister. He came to Pakistan, he sat there, he left Pakistan and never came back again. Never came back again. She knew the judiciary of Pakistan very well. We had many chats on that. And she knew exactly what she was going to do with it. There would have been a constitutional court, there would have been more, genuine provincial autonomy, which I am glad that Mr. Zardari did fulfill in his 18th Amendment. She would have strengthened the media. Now what has happened in Pakistan is that in every media house, there are anchors that are sitting who are serving the interests of vested groups. And I don't think that I am exaggerating by any means, and anybody from Pakistan will be able to tell you. Now when Mr. So-and-so speak, I know it's GHQ. When Mr. So-and-so speak, I know where they are speaking from. It's not an independent media, and disinformation is purposely being floated in Pakistan. It's not information, it's disinformation. I mean, we had this anchor who was called up by the Supreme Court. I think in the beginning the Supreme Court thought what he said they could get something out of it. But it was a complete lie. I mean, they come on television with complete lies. Even one or two anchors who have assignments, and I call them assignments, that, okay, your assignment is to vilify Mrs. Asma Jahangir. I mean, they will come to they will be on a program, and by the way, the same day I had been on a program in another television station. And they'll say, she is sitting in Washington, she is talking to Senator so-and-so, and I have been in another program. But nobody even bothers to ask them. And you cannot go against them filing defamation cases. Because what they do is they bring a huge group of mullahs with them who start shouting and screaming there that you're an infidel. And people get scared. And who are these mullahs? These mullahs are exactly the same people who are being paid by the GHQ, a monthly payment. One phone call, they all get together. Now even it's WhatsApp. WhatsApp mullahs come immediately. So they have entrenched society. In my own profession, for example, in Pakistan, there are certain lawyers who file cases. And they tell the judges that we are going to file this case, and the judge knows who have asked them to file the case. Now, if I filed the same case, they would have said, what's wrong with you? It's not maintainable. With them, yes, you have a point, so notice given. Because why notice given? He may eventually lose the case. But headlines in the newspaper will be, there has been a case, notice has been given against Mr. So-and-so who has eaten up billions of rupees. And that Mr. So-and-so doesn't even know, he has never been in that position to eat up billions of rupees. Next day dismissed, finished. But Mr. So-and-so has had it in the meanwhile.
If we've got any WhatsApp mothers watching, then shall we check? We've got, these probably need to be the last three questions. So let's take them all together, and then can you remember them? Yes, first.
Yeah.
So much, thank you so much. And I must say that you are a hope for all Pakistanis, and you speak the truth, whether it is in Islamabad or Washington or Oxford, you speak saying the truth. And my wife who is here perfectly, the new video here, I'm telling you, her face shines on this. Thank you so much. My question is between you referred to the Democrat. But when I read about the history of the Democrat, both of them have great contribution in politics, democracy in Pakistan. I think one thing common and everyone that when it comes to human rights and power, they always go for power. And they have compromised in the crucial stages of history. They have gone for power rather than going for human rights. Like, I'll give two examples. Where the mullahs, like you mentioned, he was bullied by mullahs, and he included their enemies will be official non-Muslims. There's a different discussion, but I personally believe that state has no right to decide about what kind of faith they should have. And then Benazir Bhutto is being blamed for accepting Taliban, bombing Taliban. I feel that when it comes to human rights, is it a common, is it a tragic flying a tractor that they go after power rather than go for the principle stand, just to kick out the chair and go for the leader? Question number one. Question number two is
that's cheating. That's cheating because we've got two more questions. So the question here at the front. Yes.
It is always good to listen to you, Asma. My question is very simple. Do you think the cause for what Benazir and Zulfan give their life is democracy, right? Basic human right of people of Pakistan to vote and elect their leader? Do you think it will survive and continue?
Second question.
Sorry, I didn't get your question.
Do you think it will survive in present circumstances and continue?
The right to vote.
Right to vote means democracy in Pakistan.
Yes. And third question. Yeah. Yes.
Yes, the person as a leader. I would want to mention that you are critical. I want to assume that it has something to do with the ordinance which are able to.
Well, I'll come to your question first. It was not just Hudud Ordinance.
Just explain the rule of ordinance.
No, Hudud Ordinance was a law that was passed by Jan Haq, promulgated rather, thrust on us, where there were two things that I had against it. Number one, the punishments, that was the extreme punishments of stoning to death and amputation of hands still exist. And secondly, where a woman who is raped can also be punished for extramarital sex, which had become a crime after he put in the Hudud Ordinance. And she tried very cleverly to say to me, no, it has to be a constitutional amendment and I can't do it. And people around her had been telling her that, which is not correct. And that used to upset me. Mind you, she had set up a committee. I was on that committee. And that committee had recommended certain things, and that is when her first government fell. And believe me, in front of me, her Attorney General, it was Mr. Yahya Mukhtar, who said, your government has fallen because you said that amputation of hands is a barbaric punishment. in front of me. But I was angry, not angry, but I was, not happy about this and many other things. It's not that we were always in tune with things, but I understood her compulsions. It's not that I don't understand those compulsions. And then your question, I think I rate Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and Benazir Bhutto differently. I'm sorry if I hurt someone here. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto tortured his opponents. Benazir Bhutto never did. And I'm sorry that I have to say that, but when my father was dying, that is the first time in my life I got to know that he was tortured. He'd never talked about it. He went to jail, he came back, he went smiling, he came back smiling, and he stayed altogether 7 years in jail. And I thought the old man liked it. But I have never felt in my life as hurt as I did when from his deathbed he told me the story. And it has stayed with me, something I can never get over. It's shaken me, and it continues to shake me. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was not a very democratic person. Benazir Bhutto was by instinct a democratic person. There is a difference. That is why my admiration for her is far more. In her time, there was not a single political prisoner. And Pakistan's culture was full of political prisoners. Benazir never ordered a policeman to go and torture someone. Benazir was never happy when extrajudicial killings were taking place. She was helpless but not happy. Benazir never ordered that people be humiliated. Benazir never said to her party people that you go and humiliate a woman worker of another party. Never. There is a huge difference. Politics is about power, unfortunately. But with her, yes, she did want power, no doubt, but she was not willing to take it at all costs. She would have not said, I want power, although my opponent has more votes than me, whether the country breaks or not. I think there, I will say, is the difference. And that's why when she said red lines, she meant red lines. Will Pakistan's democracy survive or not? If the judges and the generals have their way, it will not survive. But I think Pakistan's people are not crawling anymore. They are running far ahead, and the institutions are crawling. Despite vilification, people have understood, they have seen through it. Mr. Nawaz Sharif has not been disqualified because he was corrupt. He's always been corrupt, excuse me. And these same judges have exonerated him in several cases which are reported cases. Mr. Nawaz Sharif has been disqualified because the establishment doesn't like him. That is it, simply that. And if he's standing against the establishment today, for his own perhaps motives, but I think that after his exile, he has also changed. And he is here today, which I have always said to my husband, did I ever think I would see this day in Pakistan? That I have to say that Mr. Nawaz Sharif is going to bring democracy in Pakistan. Now, when you say this about Pakistan, I always say, never predict about Pakistan. If you asked me 15 years ago, would I be sitting in Oxford and saying, I support the position that Mr. Nawaz Sharif has taken, I said, oh, my dead body. And this is where we have come to. And why have we come to that? Because the establishment in our country cannot tolerate even their own children. It's a mother that eats its own children. And if we will not stop them here, they will eat us up. little Malani.
So thank you so much everyone for coming here. It was a wonderful conversation, wonderful speech, and we came to know more about Benazir Bhutto, her life story, the struggle that she had for democracy for the country, but also learning about you yourself and how you were fighting for human rights and you did not stop. You are, I always look up to you, and when I think about the word truth, if I could transform it into a human body, that would be you. So thank you so much for all that you have done and continue to do. And about Benazir Bhutto, I would say that I came to know about her when I was very young and little, but I realized who she was in 2007 when we heard the news on the TV that Benazir Bhutto was assassinated. And I was 10 years old then. And it was also the time when Talibanization was starting in Swat Valley. And this completely changed my view about bringing change into society, because seeing a woman leader, seeing that she could bring change, that she was so powerful that some people just did not want her to survive. Some people just did not want to see her alive because they knew that she was a strong force that could change the country. And I realized that yes, women can do anything. And so I have always looked up to her. She has been a role model, and she has been a role model of many women and girls in Pakistan and around the world, giving a message that women can be leaders, they can take any role that they want in society. And she stood up for justice, for democracy, and for human rights. And so it's been 10 years since we lost her, but we lost her body. We have not lost her vision. We have not lost her ideology. Her vision is still alive among us. So thank you so much for your wonderful talk on Benazir Bhutto. Thank you so much to Alan as well for doing this and for remembering Benazir Bhutto, and thank you so much to all for coming here.